Live SEC Media Days 2026 in Tampa. Ryan Lavoie, Tom Peavy, and Brooks Childress with you here on Digital Drive. We are now pleased to be joined by the coordinator, head of officials of the SEC, John McDaid, joining us today. John, we certainly appreciate the time. How are you doing?
Gentlemen, I'm doing great. How are you guys doing today?
Doing very well. Great to have you on once again. I always admit to you if I've been able to catch the presentation in the morning or not. This year, I got to right about the point in which you were about to explain the ruling that we were talking about on the punting, because we had gone through the past formations and what had been legal and all of that, and then at the very last moment, I had to leave because we had an Auburn Tiger to interview. So I apologize for not being able to finish off the rules with you, but again, I always appreciate your transparency and that sort of thing, and so we want to get into those rules in just a moment. I would be remiss here in Auburn, Alabama, to not go back to last year, because there were a couple of controversial things that happened in both the Oklahoma and Georgia games, and I know you can't share everything with us, but I think everyone would just appreciate to hear a little bit about one, the decision in the Oklahoma game, and about if there was the legality of the play where the player goes towards the sideline, stays on the field, then Oklahoma throws a touchdown. And then two, just kind of the Georgia situation, that play on the goal line, as you might recall, and then the Kirby Smart kind of clapping timeout, no timeout. So if you could walk us through just a little bit of those two adjudications, if you will.
The Oklahoma game, that's pretty simple to answer here. We put a statement after the game, and I think the statement, I don't have anything. The statement was in my words, so I don't know that I have anything more to add to that. Herb Vincent does some grammar corrections and whatnot to keep me out of trouble, but that basically was my statement on that. As far as the Georgia game, I'm comfortable with what we did down on the goal line. We have a standard of clear and obvious, and clear and obvious is something that's subjective, and we're looking for something that's clearly obvious that there was still firm control by the ball carrier, which happened to be the quarterback, while the ball had clearly broken the goal line plane, and we just couldn't get to that standard, and that's why we upheld the call on the field that the ball was short. As far as the interaction between the visiting team coach and the officials, situation I had never seen before. In that particular instance, it would have been correct for us to have charged timeout to your opponent at that particular night.
Again, there's always, these levels of frustrations and that sort of thing. But, of course, Greg Sankey was very intentional about, hey, we already believe we have a very transparent process. And, one thing I just wanted to ask you about is that, we've seen in other leagues, such as the ACC, them start to show during a broadcast maybe the decision-making room for replay control and that sort of thing. Has there been any conversation in the SEC about that and what it would possibly look like, or just reasons, pros and cons to that and that sort of thing?
I'll start off by saying when it comes to replay, we can't take our eye off the goal if we need to make sure we're 100% accurate, being efficient as possible, which is no way of saying slow the game down as little as possible. Drive down the number of misstops we have to as close to zero as possible, and we achieve that almost every single year. I mean, we're one or two, if not zero, of misstops per game. We can't get away from that, right, because the game deserves it. Now, as far as your question, yes, it's in consideration. We're very much aware what our peer conference has done last year. It started with the spring professional leagues with the UFL, right? But from my standpoint, in having these considerations, these discussions with inside the SEC with others, is the mechanics of how it would work with us. In the spring leagues, they have an exclusive window for every one of their games. It's the only game going on. From what I've seen at college and our peer conferences, they've selected windows where they only have one game going on. Typically, it's a Friday night game. Other than week 1 and Thanksgiving week, which this year is week 13, all of our games are on Saturday. And we have at a minimum 3 and sometimes as many as 5 games going on in a single window. What would the mechanics look like of trying to do that in a video center that has all of that going on at the same time? So at the end, let me repeat one last time. It is under consideration. We haven't gotten to the point where, yes, we want to go ahead and do that.
Ultimately, in the fans' eyes, it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't, though. I guess with your staff, what do you say to them? It's like, hey, listen, stick to your guns, make the call. We'll help you out with these things, but somebody's going to be upset no matter what you do. I mean, is that a conversation that goes on?
I mean, we certainly factor that. And, as far as my officials, I get the question quite a bit. Do officials officiate different because they know that the replay is there? And I was on the field back in the mid-2000s when replay first was instituted in college. I was a back judge the very first year I was in the Big East when we introduced replay, and then within a couple of years I became a referee. And there were certainly the first 2 or 3 years where veterans who had already a 10, 12, 15-year on-field career now had this instant replay review behind them. There was some caginess. There was some unease, all right? Today's officials, they've come up with nothing but having a replay system behind them. And I use the expression, give me an honest at bat, and meaning if you officiate a tight play, maybe the technology, the power went out on it 2 plays before that, and there's no replay behind it. I need an honest at bat on the field. We talk about this, and we work on this all the time, and I think my guys do give me a true honest at bat. Do we push, the second part of what I interpret from your question is, do we push things that are subjective into the replay booth? We absolutely do. I remind people that have been around long enough, I have been, I'm old enough, when the National Football League first instituted replay, they were reviewing things that were much more black and white. Did he step on the sideline? Did the ball touch the ground? Right? Did he get firm control of it before the ball touched the ground? Right? We've now introduced things into the replay booth that have a lot of judgment on it. Targeting is a terrific example, right? Even catch, no catch. When the NFL first was reviewing catch, no catch, it was things like, does he have a body part down in bounds, and did the ball hit the ground or not, right? What they added later on, and we've adopted, is can he perform an act common to the game such that he has the game or has possession long enough or firm control long enough? That is subjective. Right. We've pushed that into the replay booth. People are expecting replay to be a science-based outcome, and it's not. It's got things like clear and obvious, forcible, indicator for targeting, and does he perform an act common to the game? All subjective.
So, again, talking to John McDaid here, the SEC head coordinator of officials today on SportsCall. So let's talk about a couple rule changes. This is a rule change year. Every 2 years, I believe, is when those can be enacted. So the numbering exception rule, what's just the rule that I could not quite make to the end of it. So essentially, John, walk us through again what was going on with punt formation and players potentially deceiving the defense in a way that was determined to be illegal now.
Yeah, I won't go. We don't have the time. Sure. But what I introduced to the folks in the main media room earlier today is I took them through the progression of 3 major elements of our rules, and that is when we introduced the forward pass, we created the idea of ineligible players. We didn't have that prior to the forward pass because there was no reason for it. The second major thing I introduced was player numbering and restrictions on interior ineligible linemen. And the third thing I went through is I talked about substitution rules. We had long periods of where our game was played in the late 19th century and through great parts of the 20th century that you had to play 2 ways. And when we made unlimited substitution permanent in the mid-'60s, one of the effects it had is every position could specialize, and our offensive linemen got so much bigger, but maybe more importantly, so much heavier. They didn't have linear speed like we measure in the 40-yard dash, and they weren't ideal to go downfield and cover 45 yards and try to make an open field tackle on an opponent. So we created this numbering exception rule in the early 80s. And what has become in practice in the last 10, 12 years, let's say, is who is ineligible has become confusing to the opponent. And if you confuse the opponent, there's a good chance you're confusing the officials, because the officials aren't in the offensive play calling huddle either, right? And that's why we needed to make a change, just so that we have it's more obvious who the ineligible players, because that's a major tenet of our game when we added the forward pass. You need to declare who your ineligibles are. Coaches are upset with this, and I don't think the average fan would pick up on this rule change, right? I wanted to put the time into it that I did this morning because coaches have been very vocal about it, and they've been vocal about it because they have developed schemes to get more than just 2 gunners downfield in coverage over the last 5 to 10 years that they won't be able to use anymore unless they put 550 through 79s in the game, and to get 550 through 79s in the game, they need to do up to 5 jersey swaps every time they need to punt the ball, and they're not happy about doing that. I get why the special teams coaches aren't happy, but I also very much get why did we needed to make this change, because it just wasn't in a good competitive balance between the kickers and the receivers when the receivers couldn't identify who was eligible.
And so going through some other things that are going on this cycle. So I believe the offensive pass interference penalty to 10 yards.
10 yards, which matches the NFL. Went
Sure.
from 15 to 10.
Okay.
And then also targeting, which is, I think you probably get asked about it. I'm not you, but I feel like I would be asked about it a ton each and every cycle. But this time going to kind of tear off a penalty system for repeat offenders. And so explain a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the key is here, what is targeting? The definition of it, the requirements targeting, hasn't changed. Right, so we're probably still going to have our agree to disagree, is this targeting or not targeting? That hasn't changed. The penalty for targeting has changed, such that if you're a first-time offender, you no longer have the possibility of a first-half carryover disqualification. Right? If you're a first-time offender, you're going to be disqualified the remainder of that game that you're in, but you're not going to have a carryover. If you're a second-time offender or a 3-time or more offender, you're going to have, in the case of a second-time offender, always have a first-half carryover disqualification. And if you're a 3 or more time offender, you're going to be disqualified for an entire game. That penalty for 3 or more time offenders, that's been around for a number of years now. That hasn't been changed. We haven't had, I don't have data beyond 5 years, but for the last 5 seasons, we haven't had a single player across all of FBS have 3 or more targeting fouls in the single year.
Wait, was there a push at all for a first-time targeting of no suspension, just the penalty, or is that something that y'all are very staunch on, that no, there is going to be the suspension on the first-time targeting?
I'll answer it this way. This is an experimental rule, right? And so at the end of the 26th season, the caretakers of the game will look at data like how many targetings per game do we have, and how does that compare to the trend over the last 5 to 10 years. The statistics that I just gave you, we've averaged just under 6 two-time offenders per season and no 3 or more time offenders. Does that change after the 26th season? And they could consider making an experimental rule one more year for the 27th season, or they could consider making it just official, right? Once we get past that step, maybe they consider that in the future. But they need to take this incremental step first, because they want to make sure the change in the penalty doesn't negatively change the behavior, which is another way. They want to make sure the penalty still deters a player from committing a targeting foul.
John, last year we saw the SEC put in more rules about feigning injuries and slow substitutions. What have we seen officiating-wise on that front a year in?
You know, we definitely had, from the good of the game, the look of the game, we had one of our best years in that regards in probably the last 5. Before I get to answer directly your question about the rule change we made last year, there was a second guiding hand, if you will, on this front, and that is we created some discipline from the commissioner inside our conference. I think that is accredited to the improvement we had more than the rule change, but the rule change certainly helped. We did very well with that. The rule states such that if you present injured after the ball is ready for play, we must charge you a charge timeout. If you have none left, it's a delay game. And I was concerned about 2 things. We usually have 1 to 3 officials that are concerned with spotting the ball. We may have a 4th official 25 yards away that's dealing with an injured player situation, and they get the timing wrong because they can't put it together correctly. The other thing I was concerned with is we asked them to use judgments such as if a player gets up wobbly and takes 3 or 4 wobbly steps and then decides, you know what, I can't go the next down and goes down. Even if we had spotted the ball while they were making those wobbly steps, it wasn't the intent in the rule to make a charge timeout. Turns out we did very good in both of those instances. The officials did a really good job of understanding the timing between presenting injured and the ball being spotted, and understanding the soft judgment they need to use for someone that was wobbly right from the get-go.
He is the SEC head coordinator of officials, John McDaid, joining us today. John, we certainly appreciate the time. As always, you've been very kind to us each and every year.
It's great spending time with you guys. I wish you the best of 26 seasons. Enjoy it.
Absolutely. We wish you the best as well.
Thank you.
John
I need it.
John McDaid joining us on Sports Call. We're going to take our next time out of the program. Back with more right after this.